Hello everyone, so here we are for the first part of our homebrew tutorial series. So for this one we are going to be creating a spell. Now, to make it very clear, this tutorial is not about how to make a balanced spell. This is just explaining the form that you will enter the data into. My personal recommendation would be, if you were a DM doing this, that you would put it out for your players to play test, let them have some fun with it, see where it is broken and where it is not, and then be willing to edit it as you go on. So, from this we have gone with create a spell. For this you can normally copy a spell, as you can see from some of the things up here. If you have already homebrewed a spell and you want to modify a spell you already have homebrewed, you can select that spell and then edit that. We will be going from scratch just to give you the full show. I have, as you can see at the top here, some example pieces to help with our creation. So firstly, spell name. We're going to call this Awesome Spell. Version is very useful if you're putting this out in public. So spell level, let's call it a cantrip. Spell school. For help on the spell schools, I do believe there is a section of the PHP that goes into what each spell is. We're going to go with evocation because the awesome spell is going to do damage. So casting time. This section will be from numerical value. It will only accept numerical value, so for this we will select one action. Things to note here is special is obvious. Action, bonus action are very on the nose. Hour a minute, we're going to be tending towards your more ritual spells, which I'll get onto in a second. No action, I've never really noticed a spell that has no action. Special is it doesn't fit any of the rules. Reaction, if you select reaction, like for example the shield spell, you enter here what the reaction condition is. So if we look at the shield spell, you can see an example here. Will go casting time, one reaction, have an asterisk, then at the bottom of the spell it goes, which you take when you are hit by an attack or targeted by the magic missile spell. And this is how it will appear. Okay then, so we're going to choose an action for this. Components, you have verbal, somatic, material. Again, when you select material, you can enter the material description here. If you have copied a spell, you may notice at times some of these faded out boxes might have text in them. If you do not get rid of the text, it will appear when you publish the spell. So my recommendation would be quickly jump onto the option to make this box appear and empty it if you're not going to use it. So for this one, we don't need material components, we're just going to shout some spells and wave our hands and be awesome. So spell range type. Obviously you have self, touch, range, sight, unlimited. If you select range, you can enter how many feet it is going to be. This is a range spell of 120 feet. Duration. So obviously you have instantaneous, does what it says on the tin. Special would tell the reader that they should then go to the description. You can have time, where you can then enter again numerical value here, and then round, minute, hour, a day. Concentration will be concentration until the duration, and then until dispelled or triggered. Again, we'll send someone to here. We're going to go, it's instantaneous. So then description, this is where you will put what the spell does. You will give its descriptor. For spells, I tend to find, if you look at most of the sheets, so I've got an example wizard here with some spells, unless it's doing damage, most of it is going to be what you write in the descriptor is going to be in the steps box. Which is where I'm going to pull up some of our examples. These are some example spells I've done. The reason I want to show them is for showing you these parts here. So there are certain points with D&D Beyond where if I jump to the spell, normally you will see here it has a little highlighted in green, and when you hover over it, it will give you an effect. So for these ones, it's telling you conditions. How you do these is using tooltips. I'm going to link to this in the description down below for the full list, but these allow you to have quick fire results for different things, be them magic items, monsters, different rules. Very helpful for allowing your players to just quickly read a thing, look over it. What you'll notice here in the sidebar is the tooltips do not appear, but yet if I searched up 2 seconds, the protection from evil and good spell, here it gives you what charmed and frightened is. Again, in the sidebar it does not. This is an unfortunate part of the D&D Beyond sheet. I still find it is best practice to include tooltips if you have them, mainly because then if a player does look up the spell, they can see the tooltips when they just look at the spell page. So I'm just going to say does. This is very bad. Does a lot of damage and applies. This is very bad. Do not just put this in your description. But you will not be able to do all the details down here, which you'll soon see, unless you enter data into all of the bits with a little red star. So is this a ritual spell? If you tick this, it will apply the ritual tag, which is telling your player if they spend 10 minutes additional time casting, they will be able to cast it without using a spell slot. That does not apply here. We're not going to do that. Higher level scaling we do want. So if you are having a spell that says in bold at the bottom, at high levels it will do blank, you want this here. So character level would be for your cantrips. Spell scale is where you, as highlighted here, spell scale is, for example, every level or every 2 levels of spell slot will use something will happen. Usually your damage die goes up. Spell level is at specific levels. So for example, it might be at, if you cast this with it's a 5th level spell, and if you cast it with a 7th level spell slot, you can target an additional creature, and it only happens at that very specific piece. So for us, we want spell scale, because of course the damage will go up with level. And available for classes, this is where you will say what classes can cast this spell. So for this one, I'm going to pick Wizard. Obviously, as you can tell, every subclass, including all of your homebrew ones, are listed here. What you can do, if for example you are creating a subclass, I had this when I was creating a subclass in Wizard to let my players play a Scion, a Mystic Scion. It is here somewhere here. So I made a bunch of custom spells that only that subclass could get. What happened was I made the subclass, I published the subclass, I then made the spells. As soon as I added them onto here, they were added to that subclass's spell list. So if you are making a subclass and you want to make some custom spells for their spell list, you can make the subclass first, then make the spells, add them here, and they will be added to that subclass's spell list. If you add them to the class, it will just be everyone who plays that class can get it. So we're going to make this a wizard spell. Only wizards get the awesome spell. Additional information. Does it have an area effect? Yeah. Obviously you have your different sizes. So we're going to go with a sphere. We're going to go a 30-foot sphere from the point. This will give a little asterisk next to the AoE. I'm just going to see, do we have any AoE spells? Have Witch Bolt. I don't want Witch Bolt. If I look up some high-level spells, anti-magic field. So here you can see it has a range of self. Someone has put on their homebrew a sphere of 10 foot, and they have not ticked this little box. This little box will just give an asterisk saying there is a complexity here, look at the description for more details. A good example would probably be something like Firestorm, where it's you make a series of cubes. Each of these cubes has a set size, but the total AoE is you placing these cubes next to each other in a very interesting shape. If you want to be part of a weapon attack, for example Green Flame Blade, tick this box and you get to pick if it's a melee attack, a ranged attack. If your spell has a saving throw, like ours will do, ours will need a dex saving throw to get out the way. You put that here so that when you are looking at the spell, you know the caster can quickly see on their character sheet that they need a saving throw. So for example, that's an attack roll spell. Do I not have... Where is the spell? Where is Fireball? Ice Storm will be just as good for our example. I want to go to here. So Ice Storm, you can see here, it's saving throw, and then there is automatically the save DC for your class. So obviously we're playing a wizard. We've got our int of 14. DnDBeyond is automatically telling us what we need for the saving throw. You can then put, obviously this will appear if you've got an attack type, what the effect is on a save or fail. This is not required. I generally do not fill these in, because when you're looking at the sidebar of a spell, you're going to be reading this bit, which is the description. So I've never really seen a need for these. Same with spell tags. They can be useful, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to do them. So modifiers. Obviously you can have a spell that gives you advantage, you can have a spell that gives you a bonus on a specific ability check. The most classic one will be damage. So if, for example, we're doing a fire spell, you can go damage, fire, and we'll go 2d12. You can use primary stat, which will then add your spell casting ability modifier to it. Duration is mainly more for conditions. That is not going to affect anything at the moment. You might want to consider putting in the duration though, if say it gives a condition or something, for when the combat tracker begins to take on things like character sheet effects. So for example, if you got a bonus to acrobatics, and you say, in this case, you get a +5. Your fixed value will generally be something that is fixed. So for this case, it'll be acrobatics gets a +5 bonus. You could then put a duration, and hopefully when the combat tracker gets more involved with character sheets, when you cast that spell and you can select a target, that player will go, oh, I have this bonus, and the combat tracker will keep track that it's that many rounds or that much minutes that effect comes in for. Some of these modifiers are a bit more odd because they are pulling from the generic modifier form, things like carrying capacity, Eldritch Blast, bonus damage, bonus range. You're not going to put this traditionally in a spell. The main ones you're going to want to know are things like, potentially, could this spell inflict a vulnerability? Could you have a spell that gives resistance, gives a sense? For example, Blindsight, Dark Vision, Tremor Sense. There are spells that do that for a duration. You might do size. Yes, you have size. For example, if you want to modify the Shrink spell. I'm just quickly checking through some of these. You might have ones that replace a damage type of a certain thing. For example, if you had a spell that maybe set the sword on fire and it replaced its slashing damage with fire damage. So there are some creative ones you can do. Obviously, for this example, we're just going to go damage, and we're going to go, it's fire 2d12, and we'll go plus your primary stat. So then we'd save this. So conditions. This is for a spell to apply, remove, or suppress a condition. You can set the duration. Again, this will not... If I was to cast a spell, say this spell... I guess for this one it would actually apply prone. But for example, say I wanted a spell that made you frightened, or that removed a level of exhaustion, I could put that here. But if then this character was to cast the spell, I wouldn't gain or remove conditions here. It wouldn't affect a monster. The combat tracker is not yet at a state that will have an effect. But again, you might want to put that in now, so that later, if that functionality does get added by the devs, you're not having to suddenly go through 20, 30 different spells you've written going, I need to add all these things again. And then we have at higher levels. So this is where I would go scale value. So we're going to say every level, you pick the modifier here that's scaling. So we would want additional count. So additional creatures will be more creatures affected. Additional points. Which one's additional points? Additional points are for damage or healing. Additional count, I believe, will let you modify the die count. So for example, we will go to 5 d12. And then, yes, the scale value is when stuff occurs. So if you picked character level, you've got to type in, as shown here, you would have to go 5, 7, 11. For that, if you've gone specific levels, you'll have to go, say you went at a 6th level spell slot, something happens, you would then go on the details here and say what happened. But because we picked the one where it's every spell slot, by putting in 1, we're going every level of spell slot above what we put in, it will have an effect. Now this actually will not work because we put it as a cantrip, so what we actually want to do is make it a first level spell. And then I'm going to look at this character So if I now go to example, I'm going to reload them just to re-put in the cache. And I'm going to go awesome spell, so it still thinks it's a cantrip right now. Because it hasn't fully updated, it can take, I believe the devs said, up to about 15 minutes for the site to acknowledge that a change has happened. So while we wait a few minutes for that change to pass through, I'm just going to re-click save again just to make sure. We'll quickly look at some examples. So this spell I made, Psychometry, obviously has material components. This one has a skill check, and an effect happens based on the skill check. So here we've put in what skill check is, we've put in what the DC and what the effects are. Most of this is all in the description, so we actually do not have any of the rest of this filled in. We have here a spell that increases with level, and the effect of the spell is it pushes you back a little bit further. I should say here, additional 5 feet. So here we've had to put special because it is not a traditional effect that the spell would normally have. And then we have Mindstorm, which is a damage spell. So again, this one we've put in the classic. Here is the area of effect, what the saving throw is, what happens when you fail, what happens when you succeed. We've put in the area of effect mechanically here. We've put in a damage effect, and we've put that it scales every level 1d8. Here we did put it as additional points, so I might need to change awesome spell to actually, yeah, because I think count is just you change the dice. Did you change the dice number? Yeah, so additional points might be fine here if we just go additional 2. So hopefully this time the awesome spell will have altered. If it's not, oh well. Bar that, is there anything I quickly need to mention with spells? So with this you don't need to worry about the dice rolling mechanics. That is automatically done with the modifiers. So what you should get is obviously a spell that can be cast at a higher level has the blue text effect, and as you can see the dice does increase in size as you go, and when you click on it it will automatically do that for you. Okay then. Yes, so if I wanted to make an attack roll be part of it rather than a saving throw, I would put it here. I'm not sure if I covered that, but yeah, you need, if you wanted it to say be like Witch Bolt where you need to make an attack roll, I would put ranged attack here. I do not believe there is a place for you to, yeah, your range will be determined by this, but if you want an attack roll you put it here in attack type. The best thing I would probably recommend doing is either creating some spells, but rather than making your own, selecting actually spells that have already been published. Look at those spells, look at how they work, look at some of the fine details that kind of the devs have put into some of the weirder spells. And then another thing I would recommend doing is trying to replicate a spell. So for example, I've got Firestorm here, trying using the editor to replicate it. That way you can kind of prove that you know what the system's doing. Because one of the things about the homebrew system that is very interesting is this is effectively the same editor the devs have. I believe they have a few more bells and whistles than we do, but generally this is the form that the devs use for making spells that wizards give them. So I'm going to try one more time, reloading the character sheet just to see if it has not changed. Oh well, that has not gone according to plan. But the lesson should still prove useful. Obviously this is a terrible spell. Do not, when you're actually designing a spell, do not design a spell like this as a descriptor, or especially with this kind of damage for a first level spell. But hopefully it is useful to having seen someone just briefly go through the different parts of the sheet. With modifiers, I know I've glossed over a lot of it. That is mainly because a lot of it you don't actually need. It's not really intended to work with the spell system, it's intended for other parts. So I will actually go into those modifiers more on a later video, most likely when we're covering things like feats, subclasses, and the like. But do put in the description, do put in the comments, any questions you have. If there's anything about the spell system that you would maybe like me to prod a little bit more, or show a bit more. And yes, I will be putting a bunch of resources in the description for further reading about designing spells, if there's maybe something I haven't quite covered or you need it written down. Also, I'll be putting in the tooltips section so that you know kind of the things you can link. And yeah, so thank you all for joining. I'm not sure what the next part's going to be. It might be subclasses, then again we might leave subclasses till later, so do put in the comments down below what you would like to see next. And with that, I would like to thank you all for coming and joining. See you all next time.